Okay, check, check, 1, 2. Let's get this party started. Okay, excellent connection. No dropped packets. Oh my gosh. There are dropped frames. What's going on? Hold on. Okay, it stopped. Okay, we haven't dropped any frames in about 20 seconds. Okay, all right. It must have been some sort of network hiccup. I probably was broadcasting too much too quick. Let me just make sure everything's kosher. Okay, analytics, we're looking good. Let me test the chats. Whew. So yesterday, I got super tired, and I needed some sleep. So I spent yesterday relaxing. Okay. All right. Well, that's everything. All right. Now we're not dropping any more frames, are we? No. Okay. Perfect. Now we got a lunch break. Here, if I set this to 4 days, you guys should be able to see this. Oh, let me make sure the 10th. Okay, good. Okay, good. All right, so I'm getting back into the swing of using my calendar. I kind of stopped for a little bit because I don't know what I was. Okay, so that's a reminder to set an alarm. There's so many things to do. Oops. Okay, I just did that. That was the reminder to make sure I had a calendar thing on September 10th, and I'm desperately going to do that because I got to apply for some jobs today. Okay, and that's already taken care of. And then when this alarm goes off in 26 minutes, that means that the bread is ready to be put in the oven, or the air fryer, actually. Okay, so I've done everything that I possibly can. We got a lunch break. One thing I want to do on my lunch break is... Oh yeah. Yeah, let me make a reminder. Check yesterday's live stream for any strikes. Okay, that needs to be purple. Okay. And one thing I want to do is check out this music. So I gotta eat something, and what I'm doing is I'm looking for music to go in my PvP video. So I want to see if there's some good stuff here. This would make great. It's a little loud. This would be good at opening inspirational opening credit music. Sadly, I don't want to risk it, because if I if I put a ton of work into the PvP video, and then later on it could get flagged because I use this music. It sucks. It sucks, man. I gotta find. Now that's Moby music though. I don't think Moby's gonna have what I'm looking for. I need to set aside some time to start hunting around for more music. I really do. For the PvP video, I got some good stuff already, but I need more. More. Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. I got a ton of things that I need to do. I slept in. I still need to catch up on a couple of Discord messages. Like, I overslept. I really did. I got up at about 11. And then, whoops. And then let me move that down there. And clean kitchen. Made bread dough. Okay. Catched up on Discord messages. Need to set a reminder about taking a break on Twitch, and then I gotta do some job hunting, and then I gotta help my roommate with his online business, and then I need to apply for the YouTube Partner Program. So there's just so much to do. So while I do that, let me. I guess we're just gonna put on. My throat's suddenly dry. Put on the documentary we were watching again. There we go, and this is covering. Jeez, man. It's covering Alien Isolation, going over entire history of horror games. So we'll put this on and a few other things while I'm working on stuff in the background, and then when all that stuff is done, we got to go back over. I got to get that hotkey tutorial finished, and I've decided that I need to update the first video because things have slightly changed when registering for Turtle WoW. There's a couple of other prompts and stuff that now exist that didn't back when I recorded all of the footage for that tutorial. So I need to update that footage and update that process because it needs to be current. Otherwise, what the fuck am I doing? So a little bit extra work, but I'll be a lot happier with it. And I think the Turtle WoW folks will be a lot happier with it as well. So we're going to get that updated. Let's see here. When we here okay, I'll here. Let me make update TWOW episode 1 with new install procedure. Okay, and we probably won't get to that today, so let's just move this over here. And then the other thing that I want to work on is update, finish hotkey tutorial. Excuse me. Okay, and then I need to eat. Okay, so I'm just updating stuff on my calendar so I know all the stuff that I did. I can look back and see what I was doing. I do still need to catch up on Discord messages, so I'm going to put that down there. There we go. I got to read a couple more Discord messages. Put it right there. Okay. All right, so now I'm going to eat. We'll check out this tutorial, this documentary. I'll find another one. I just got a bunch of stuff to work on in the background, so we're just going to kick it. And doing this kind of stuff helps me concentrate. So here we go.
More mixed than expected, including a now infamous 5.9 from IGN, with criticism mostly centered on its long length, repetition, and difficulty. Its sales would also fall below Sega's expectations, which raised the question of if a horror game of this quality wasn't enough to be successful, then what is? One possible answer would be a new title directed by horror's most famous game designer. Shinji Mikami was responsible for the two most influential, and to some, the two greatest horror games ever made. But after Resident Evil 4, Mikami left Capcom to ultimately found his own studio, Tango Gameworks, whose first game released the very same month as Alien Isolation, and saw Mikami return to the role of director. The Evil Within seemed to be exactly what survival horror fans had spent years longing for, with Mikami even saying his motivation for returning to horror was that everything had become focused on action now, and that he wanted to bring back true survival horror. With The Evil Within, he had complete creative freedom to do this, and the result was in many ways faithful to survival horror of old. The Evil Within saw a return to resource management, manual saving via safe rooms, exploration, puzzles, and a slower pace than other action horror games of the time. Its camera would copy the more modern over-the-shoulder approach popularized by RE4, but still stuck close to the player to limit their view, with movement heavily slowed when aiming. And yet, in other ways, The Evil Within felt decidedly modern, with plenty of slow-walking segments or scripted set pieces very representative of AAA gaming in 2014. Ultimately, The Evil Within was seen as a solid attempt at modernizing classic survival horror that risked being too old school for some and too contemporary for others. Its reception was positive, but it wasn't the horror savior to kickstart the genre that some had hoped for. Which leaves 2014's final prospect. PT came out of nowhere, releasing as a free demo on the PlayStation Network one day in August, in what might be one of the greatest pieces of gaming marketing there's ever been. The demo itself was simple. One hallway repeating seemingly endlessly, with the only gameplay being walking and looking. As the player progressed, this hallway changed. Lights dimmed, doorways opened or closed, reality unraveled, and it became apparent that you are not in here alone.
Several days before the murders, look behind you. I said, look behind you, like he was chanting some strange spell. There was another family.
PT was a masterclass in atmosphere and suspense. The first-person view and photorealism immersed players, the short length kept its scares fresh and effective, and the mystery surrounding the demo and the mysteries contained within it created a viral marketing sensation as players raced to figure out what PT actually was. The answer didn't take long to arrive. I mean, the internet has seen far more cryptic ARGs than this, and PT wasn't meant to be unsolvable, it simply wanted to tease. After fulfilling a range of cryptic criteria, PT, or Playable Teaser, ends with the player finally escaping their purgatory and stepping out into the town as the camera pulled back to show actor Norman Reedus and the planned game's real title, Silent Hills. Reedus wasn't the only big name attached to the project either. The reboot was headed by gaming auteur Hideo Kojima, Academy Award-winning director Guillermo del Toro was co-directing, and even celebrated horror mangaka Junji Ito was in talks to provide monster designs. Silent Hills seemingly had everything needed to be the biggest thing to happen to horror since RE4. A proven effectiveness in scaring players, as shown in PT, the budget and experience of a gaming powerhouse in Kojima and Konami, star power to pull in audiences from other mediums thanks to Reedus, Del Toro, and Ito, and more hype than a horror game could dream of thanks to its demo, and this was all before the marketing even officially began. The fact that this came at a time when many begrudged the loss of horror in horror games, and that many found PT to be genuinely terrifying, made this game seem like some destined savior of the genre. The perfect game sent at the perfect time to make all wrongs finally right. And then, 8 months later, it was cancelled. Konami and Kojima clashed during the completion of Metal Gear Solid 5, with Silent Hills becoming a notable casualty. And so it was that horror's savior died, and with barely a whimper, dooming the genre forevermore. Except, that's not what happened at all. In fact, by 2015, horror wasn't struggling, it was positively soaring, reaching larger audiences than ever previously, and with more new titles than at any other time, as accepted beliefs around both survival horror and action horror came to be questioned and rewritten. And if anything, PT wasn't a response to action horror's failings, but simply a part of this new, more dominant wave. If horror's greatest problem is familiarity, indie games provide a solution. But pinpointing exactly where indie horror begins isn't easy. For many years, there was little delineation between mainstream gaming and indie gaming, with PC games often being independent by default. This means many of the earlier games in this video could technically meet the definition of being indie. Still, for the most part, indie game has come to be used as a label to differentiate smaller, lower budget games in a modern era dominated by high budget ones. The first horror games to meet this criteria were made in RPG Maker, a game development tool that dates back to the early 90s. Like Corpse Party, a horror adventure game originally released in 1996 for the PC 98, made by 22-year-old college student Makoto Kedwin. 10 years later, Corpse Party received a remake for mobile phones, which later got enhanced and released on PC in 2008, before an English PSP version in 2011 finally brought it international attention. And then additional remakes, re-releases, and sequels expanded its reach even further. Corpse Party featured a group of students staying behind after class who get transported to a nightmare version of the school, haunted by the ghost of a child murdered there. Its gameplay was reminiscent of older JRPGs, with 2D sprites, a top-down perspective, and even JRPG-style battles, although these were removed in future versions. This is accompanied by exploration, puzzle-solving, and visual novel-style dialogue. Corpse Party's initial popularity was likely helped by its subversion of JRPG conventions, as instead of the carefree, uplifting adventure of other games in the genre, it was graphically violent and deliberately disturbing, with its cute anime visuals hiding an unexpected brutality. Meanwhile, Corpse Party's later popularity owed much to its story and lore, which needed to be pieced together by players and generated much discussion online. Basically, it was a game for the social media age of fan theories and lore videos, even if it actually predated this era by several years. This also helps explain the popularity of other early RPG Maker hits, like Yume Nikki, the surreal freeware walking sim that first released in 2004 and received an English fan translation around 2008. Yume Nikki was a game about exploration, with no combat, dialogue, or game overs. Instead, the player journeys through various dreamlike worlds, many of which contain no horror elements whatsoever. And yet, Yume Nikki was undeniably disturbing, in part because its lack of enemies or objectives was so unlike other games of its era. Yume Nikki wasn't simply weird in its imagery, it broke the rules of what games were expected to be, and let players search for meaning by themselves, with most hints that could be found suggesting these dreams hid something disturbing. Yet, RPG Maker horror could also be direct. Ao Oni released in 2008 and found great popularity on Japanese internet before receiving an English fan translation soon after. The premise of the game was simple. A group of high school students explore an abandoned mansion only to be locked inside with a purple Oni who chases them, transforming them into Onis if caught. The horror was equally simple and owed much to how the Oni appears at unscripted moments to create tense, unpredictable chase sequences. All three of these games took different approaches to horror, yet shared a contrast between their minimal, often innocent visual design and darker subject matter, and use of limited graphics to invoke the player's imagination. In the West, however, indie horror would find success through very different reasons. In 2006, two inexperienced game developers named Jens Nilsson and Thomas Grip created a tech demo for an annual student game dev competition in Sweden. The judges were unimpressed with their entry, but when the demo was released for free online, other gamers had a rather different reaction. This demo was called Penumbra, and less than 1 year later, after substantial changes, it would become Frictional Games' debut title. Penumbra Overture was made by a core team of just 3 people, with 9 others providing additional help. The game followed a physicist who gets stuck in an abandoned mine in Greenland, and this setting played an important role. Unnerving isolation is at the heart of Penumbra, but this wouldn't have been possible if not for how immersive the experience was. Frictional might not have been able to compete with AAA games in pure graphics, but the first-person perspective, lack of a HUD, interactive world, and realistically modeled physics system all worked to pull players into the desolate surroundings. Gameplay was reminiscent of classic adventure games, with an emphasis on puzzle solving and atmospheric exploration, and while combat was included, the player was generally ineffective and incentivized to avoid enemies to create a feeling of disempowerment. Overture was praised for its unsettling atmosphere, and would be followed by the even more effective Penumbra Black Plague 1 year later. But it was Frictional's next game that would truly change horror. It was in this period that indie games were emerging as a distinct part of gaming thanks to digital distribution platforms like Steam and Xbox Live Arcade, which meant that smaller titles didn't need to compete for physical shelf space in retail stores. This helped create an interest in shorter, more subversive, or just more artistic games from developers. For example, 2009's The Path was a twisted retelling of Little Red Riding Hood that explored the loss of innocence in growing up and featured no traditional gameplay, being described as an anti-game or art game by reviewers. Downfall from Harvester Games would bring back point-and-click adventure gameplay alongside a psychologically heavy narrative of a man's descent into madness, and Aversion would provide one of the first examples of a game hiding horror elements underneath a completely different style of visuals and gameplay, as the cartoonish platformer about rescuing a princess slowly unraveled into something more disturbing. Still, the reason indie games conquered horror wasn't just because of the rise of digital distribution, as was the case for most other indie genres, but rather something else. In 2010, Frictional Games released Amnesia: The Dark Descent to strong reviews. Amnesia made a return to Penumbra's immersive first-person exploration, but removed combat entirely, leaving the player completely helpless if caught. Despite this, Amnesia still retained a focus on gameplay through the introduction of a sanity meter, where sanity was lost through spending time in darkness or witnessing monsters or other unsettling events, and makes you increasingly vulnerable as it gets lower. This intensified the resource management, as not having enough light sources would lead to a loss of sanity in addition to having to navigate in the dark. It also incentivized players to avoid looking at enemies as much as possible, which helped preserve the fear of the unknown, making it feel even scarier. Most of all though, the sanity meter gave the player greater agency, leading to tension and stress that heightened the horror. Just like how Resident Evil 1 makes it the player's responsibility when to use ink ribbons to save their progress, Amnesia forced players to weigh the risks between its two core systems. Do you light torches to preserve sanity but risk running out of tinderboxes later, or should you stay in the darkness and risk your sanity? Should you use your lamp even if there's a risk you might be seen by an enemy, and just how much sanity are you willing to lose hiding in the darkness when an enemy is out there patrolling? Amnesia never let you feel safe, but unlike in so many other horror games, it also understood how to be patient. It takes several hours before the player is ever actually in danger in Amnesia, and yet the build-up to the first enemy encounters was agonizing. Monsters are glimpsed in the briefest moments, menacing sounds are heard waiting for you in the distance, and the narrative of a man who has deliberately drunk an amnesia potion to escape something only hinted at leaves you without the comfort of even knowing what might be out there. And still, Amnesia forces you to wait, almost lulling you into a false sense of security, but maybe the game only wants to tease, until you hear that siren for the first time. Amnesia remains a masterclass in suspense and pure terror. In a time when mainstream horror games had little actual horror and were empowering players with slick action and fun spectacle, Amnesia gave players the exact opposite. Multiple reviews praised it as the scariest game ever made, and yet its sales started slow. In fact, in a blog post 1 week after its release, Frictional Games expressed concern over their future and said that despite the better than expected reviews, sales were only in line with their more modest expectations. But, unlike with most games, Amnesia's sales didn't slow down over time, thanks largely to this, what you are doing right now.
Leaving.
I am so scared.
I'm leaving. Oh!
Fuck.
Amnesia's
I guess that's what people are wanting to see when somebody plays a horror game. I guess those are the types of reactions that they want to see. I don't react that way to playing horror games. I might get a little surprised or jump scared, but it's probably boring to watch me play a horror game.
suspenseful horror was perfect for creating singular moments of pure panic. Perfect for creating exaggerated reactions that could be forever immortalized in YouTube Let's Plays and React compilations. Together, these videos would get tens of millions of views at a time when YouTube was still in its infancy, kicking off a symbiotic relationship between indie horror games and content creation that is still going strong to this day. It's not hard to imagine what the appeal of this content might be. Reactions like this
Oh! 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 Oh my god! Oh my god! Ah! What's going on?
are entertaining, but horror videos also circumvent one of horror's downsides. A big part of the appeal of horror is that it gives you a feeling of fear with the reality of safety. They allow people to enjoy the thrills of a dangerous or scary situation without actually being in any danger. A horror-based YouTube video can do the same, with one extra layer of removal by letting you watch rather than play to provide an even safer way to experience a game like Amnesia. Perfect for people that find the scariest game ever made to be maybe a little too scary. Just like how some people might prefer to watch a scary movie alongside a friend because otherwise they find it too scary. Regardless, Amnesia: The Dark Descent had a substantial impact on all of horror gaming. It proved horror games could be critically and commercially successful without combat, that horror didn't need the biggest budgets to be scary, and that there was still a market for scary games, even if action horror was dominating the mainstream, and maybe because action horror was so dominant. And with time, Amnesia would be just one of many internet-fueled success stories. To understand the role of the internet on horror, there might be no better example than Slender: The 8 Pages. Released in 2012 and based on a popular creepypasta that dates back to 2009, Slender: The 8 Pages was a simple first-person game where you collect pages in a forest at night while avoiding the eponymous Slender Man. Slender would also find much success on YouTube, and would even be important in creating the soon-to-be biggest YouTuber in the world.
This was like the first viral kind of thing I had, which was that I found this game called Slender on my broarmy.net forum. Someone posted it. I double checked on YouTube. Has anyone else played this? Nothing. No one. And I was like, this is gonna be amazing. Yeah, this is my first viral hit. I was so proud.
Yet, there was one important difference between Slender and Amnesia, which is that unlike Amnesia, Slender was not a good game. With a runtime of under 30 minutes, no real strategy to the gameplay other than trial and error and memorizing page locations, and no depth to the horror or narrative, it's hard to defend this game. Its strength was how it took advantage of something already popular on the internet, and its ability to create jump scares.
Whoa. Whoa! What the hell is this?
This was
so-
enough to generate
it's
who
so
cares if a
grating.
game is only 30 minutes long in an era where YouTube videos themselves
I don't want to. I don't want to listen to somebody screaming into their microphone while they're playing a horror game. It is not my idea of entertainment.
only lasted about 10 minutes. And who cares if there was no gameplay when most people experiencing it aren't playing? This was the downside of YouTube. The internet allowed many great games to be discovered and reach the success they deserve, but not every success did deserve it, and many low-quality, cheaply produced titles popped up over the years to try to cash in on this.
Yeah, there was quite the. I guess the he's going over the indie horror trend. Yeah, it's when the zombie trend ran out. What was I think I liked Alien Isolation, and Outlast was pretty good. And he also covered Fear. Fear if Fear counts as a horror game, then it's my favorite horror game.
Craze through trying to go viral rather than trying to create a good game. This proliferation of lower quality games risked giving the higher quality ones a bad reputation through association, something which may even have happened in time with Amnesia: The Dark Descent. But there was more to indie horror than just let's play fodder, and by 2012, that was starting to be obvious. For example, modding communities had been making horror games for years, and they were finally starting to get more mainstream recognition, as can be seen with Half-Life 2 mod Grey or Gold Source mod Cry of Fear. Cry of Fear was particularly successful, taking heavy influence from Silent Hill in its audio and enemy design, as well as some not-so-subtle homages, and combining this with tense first-person shooting and urban exploration. Its story featured a young man waking up in the city of Stockholm to find it infested with monsters, and tackled themes of mental illness and trauma. Meanwhile, solo dev Jasper Byrne's Lone Survivor would make a return to the classic survival horror gameplay of slow exploration, resource management, and puzzle solving, alongside retro-inspired 2D visuals. Byrne's inspiration was a desire to revive the survival horror genre that he saw as having disappeared, and Lone Survivor would mark the start of something of a retro revival. 2012 would also bring a new wave of RPG Maker horror games, in what's now seen as a golden age for the subgenre, with examples like Mad Father, The Witch's House, and Ib? Okay, I never looked up how to pronounce that game. We're going to go for Ib, which all received praise for their strong stories. In 2013, indie horror would see another mainstream success in Outlast, a game clearly influenced by Amnesia: The Dark Descent, and successful for many of the same reasons. Outlast was a creative take on the found footage genre of horror films, except with the player cast as the one doing the filming. In it, a journalist investigates a remote psychiatric hospital only to find it's been overtaken by its dangerous inhabitants, who they then become trapped inside with. A camcorder acted as the player's night vision, with batteries needing to be scavenged as you explore, but Outlast gameplay remained simple, with no combat and a need to run, hide, and avoid enemies instead. These stealth sections could sometimes overstay their welcome, and the player will probably find themselves captured so many times that the horror of this becomes noticeably less effective. But Outlast's real achievement was its relentless cruelty. For example, in one early sequence, the player finds themselves fleeing from a group of inmates, only to be rescued at the last second by a mysterious stranger, who then knocks you unconscious, straps you into a wheelchair, takes you to the asylum's exit, the very place you've been trying to reach, tells you you're free to leave if you want to, before wheeling you away for some surgery that I don't think I can show on YouTube. A lot of horror games enjoy stabbing players with a knife, but Outlast took glee in twisting that knife around and then sticking a finger inside the wound while asking with mock concern if that stung. The result was undeniably crude, but it was also effective, and further showed why indie horror could be successful in this era where mainstream horror...
Yeah, could you imagine any mainstream AAA developer trying to make a game like that? You'd never get it past the public relations and the HR and the HR. There's no way a AAA developer would ever be able to make something like this.
horror was struggling. The extreme lengths Outlast was willing to go to was exactly the type of thing mainstream gaming wouldn't do for fear of alienating audiences. But Outlast wasn't trying to be for everyone, and its unrivaled brutality helped it to stand out and get attention in the social media age where attention was everything. And speaking of social media, 2014 would show just how important it had grown to be. Scott Cawthon had made around 80 games before creating the one which made him famous. The idea for the game was born out of criticism for his earlier work, which some found unintentionally terrifying. And so in response, he decided instead to make something intentionally terrifying. Five Nights at Freddy's released in August 2014 and featured simple point-and-click gameplay about watching security cameras in a Chuck E. Cheese-inspired pizzeria during the night shift.
Yeah, I'm glad this fad is pretty much over. I enjoyed Outlast, I enjoyed Alien Isolation, but other than that, it wasn't my thing. I have to jump, that's what, my alarm went off, so I need to jump up. I just got to put some food in the oven, and I need to take a quick bio break, and then it's back to applying for jobs. So let me put on this so it looks all nice. And then everybody just take 5 minutes really quick. We'll be, what's here, AFK, BRB bio. Yeah, so everybody just take 5, get up, stretch, smoke them if you got them. And then, because I don't like to leave videos running while I'm up in AFK. I'm actually really enjoying that documentary. So let me go check that out. And then I've only got to apply to 4 more jobs. And then, I guess I could skip doing that today and just do a lot of it tomorrow. Yeah, because I really want to get back to making these videos. Okay. So let me... Yeah, all right, let me get up. I'll be back. And then as soon as I get done applying for these jobs, we'll get back to some video editing. So see you in a minute. Okay, I'm back. I'm making some homemade dough, some homemade bread, I guess. And the dough definitely needs another hour to rise. I had to knead it a bunch more. That thing's really loud, isn't it? Okay. So I'm setting the alarm for another hour because then the dough should be done rising for the second time and I should be able to bake it. Oh, then I'll have delicious homemade bread. Okay. I'm back. I'm trying to stay awake. I'm super tired. I gotta get this done. There we go. Let's get back to the documentary. Where's my documentary? There we go. Okay. All right, here we go. We're back.
Within the pizzeria were several wandering homicidal animatronics, which players had to avoid by locking the doors to the security office if they got close. The challenge in this came from having limited power, with watching cameras, turning on lights, and locking doors, all expending this resource. Therefore, players had to save enough power to make it through the night, but spend enough power to work out when an animatronic is nearby so they could lock the door in time. The price of failure was a jump scare. As jump scares are regularly criticized in horror games, it might be tempting to dismiss Five Nights at Freddy's as just another low-budget viral wannabe, and it certainly was low budget, but there are reasons why FNAF succeeded where other games didn't. For one thing, its jump scares were in many ways the opposite of cheap. In most games, the punishment for failure is a loss of progress. FNAF instead used jump scares to punish the player, but this only happened if you failed, and rather than coming out of nowhere, the entire experience was instead designed around making players anticipate this moment and deriving dread from knowing that it might be coming. Still, there's no denying that FNAF's jump scares helped it to succeed on YouTube, and my god did this game succeed on YouTube. Five Nights at Freddy's didn't gain the millions of views of Amnesia in 2010, or the tens of millions of Slender in 2012, but rather hundreds of millions.
Yeah, I always wondered what was in all those empty heads back there. You know. Thank you! This is probably the scariest game I've ever played. I've never felt such paranoia. In a sense, it's not even a sense of dread anymore. It's just, I know I'm gonna die, and I don't know when it's gonna happen. That's the kind of feeling I got.
The first video from YouTuber Markiplier has 124 million views. Multiple highly successful careers were launched by this game, and in time, FNAF would transform into a massive media franchise, with numerous sequels, a highly profitable film, and more films planned for the future. Five Nights at Freddy's was made by one man with no experience with horror in just 6 months, and yet its creepy animatronics resonated with younger audiences, and in time it became one of horror games' largest success stories. Few other titles show the massive importance of the internet for indie games so clearly, or show how dominant indie horror had become. And yet the genre was also impressively varied, which other games that same year show. For example, Darkwood would use an unusual top-down perspective, with a limited field of view that only showed the player what your character could actually see. This helped create an atmosphere of dread and paranoia, something only heightened by the day-night cycle that forced players to hunker down in their hideout every night and pray that whatever horror lurks outside leaves you alone. Darkwood's gameplay took inspiration from recent, not horror survival games, with an emphasis on exploring a large open world and scavenging materials, and even its twisted arboreal setting felt highly distinct. Or, for a different type of forest, there was The Forest, a single or cooperative horror survival game that also released in early access that year. The Forest featured even more modern survival mechanics, as well as a large number of cannibalistic mutants, and some of the scariest cave sequences that had ever been seen in a game. The sandbox nature of the survival genre helped The Forest to create a genuinely unpredictable experience, where moments of tension and desperation could occur unscripted. Other indie games could be refreshingly experimental. 2015's Monstrum would take the traditional survival horror foundation of older games and combine it with roguelike systems, including procedurally generated levels and permadeath. This combination addressed the problem of gameplay becoming familiar and thus ineffective at creating fear and tension. Admittedly, Monstrum was unsuccessful in other ways, with repetition brought by permadeath being a downside, but this was still the type of experimentation that felt so absent from mainstream horror since Resident Evil 4. 2015 would also bring the release of Frictional's next game, Soma. Set in an underwater research facility 100 years in the future, Soma never came close to matching The Dark Descent when it came to sheer terror, yet it made up for this with its stronger story. Exploring themes of consciousness, identity, and mortality, Soma's existential horror was deeply unsettling, hugely memorable, and further showed the strength of indie horror as a means to tell creative stories. By 2016, the indie scene had had enough time to respond to the cancellation of Silent Hills. PT's successors could almost be their own subgenre at this point, but Layers of Fear was one of the first. In it, the player took the role of a disturbed painter trying to complete his magnum opus as they explored a changing house in first person and uncovered the events that preceded this. The faster turnaround of indie games meant they could more easily chase trends like this, but other indie games would resolutely stick to doing their own thing. In addition to Steam, itch.io would become a trove of creative independent projects, and horror has always been one of the most popular tags. One of the best known of these is Anatomy from Kitty Horror Show, which provided a unique take on the age-old haunted house trope. In it, players explored an empty suburban home, collecting audio tapes that offered metaphors and hints about this setting, as your surroundings seem to slowly change and evolve in unsettling ways. Kitty Horror Show's work uses lo-fi aesthetics to conjure mixed feelings of familiarity and unease, and they are just one of many creators who have found success on the independent marketplace. Still, by 2017, indie games had truly cemented themselves as a dominant force within gaming, and the range and depth of experiences they offered allowed them to cater to many different players. 2017 alone would see games like Detention, a distinctly Taiwanese game about history and tragedy, Little Nightmares, a surreal yet polished puzzle platformer, Bendy and the Ink Machine, a creative take on twisted nostalgia, Doki Doki Literature Club, a subversive and shocking visual novel, and Chapter 1 of Faith, an 8-bit survival horror game that proved the genre could work even on an Atari, with the right design. The level of success of different games has obviously varied, but the cultural reach of the most successful arguably matches anything seen in the rest of gaming, and indie horror has continued to shape the genre ever since. If familiarity is horror's greatest problem, indie games provide a solution. The experiences they offer can be incredibly varied, bringing constant unfamiliarity, and as soon as one series, setting, antagonist, or gameplay type starts to feel expected and overused, new titles can arrive to offer new experiences that the greater discoverability of the internet can allow to find a sizable audience, even with minimal marketing. Many of the other disadvantages that lower budget games bring can also work in horror's favor. Low quality graphics can be eerily uncanny while leaving more to the player's imagination. Short runtimes can naturally prevent the horror from getting stale. Being able to feature little gameplay can allow for a greater emphasis on immersion or narrative while allowing for completely different types of experiences. And not needing to cater to large mainstream audiences can liberate games to be weirder, crueler, and more experimental while still being able to succeed. Indie games have so many answers to horror's problems, which their continued success reflects. But while mainstream horror might have taken a beating in the
there's a lot of thunder and lightning. I think hold on. Is there another hurricane coming? Ferdinand could form up this weekend. What are we looking at here? Partly cloudy. Oh, man. There is something going on. Puerto Rico weather. I want to see the satellite. Okay, well that's why it's all over there. So we are seeing. All right. So anyway, I guess the reason I'm saying this is because if the stream suddenly stops, I probably lost power, and I just wanted to throw that out there. I just wanted to see, you know, is there a tropical storm or hurricane near Puerto Rico? So there's a heat advisory, localized flooding, thunderstorms, high rip current, and small craft advisory. Okay. Dangerous heat in the west, coastal flooding, high rip current in the weekend. Okay. All right. Well, I don't see anything about a tropical storm or a hurricane or any of that kind of stuff. So we just got some heavy weather. That's all. That's all. So yeah, just be advised if the stream suddenly stops. It's not because I wanted it to. It's just because we lost power, and that's how it goes.
2010s, there was one series that should never be ruled out. Following Resident Evil's struggles and PET's cancellation, the future of horror seemed uncertain. Yet new games continued to release, as the grip of action finally loosened. In 2015, Supermassive Games' Until Dawn would resurrect the interactive movie format that had once showed such promise 20 years earlier. Until Dawn combined narrative choices with quick-time event-filled action sequences to create unpredictable outcomes for its group of teenagers whose getaway to a remote mountain lodge goes disastrously wrong. Through this, the game would replicate the thrills of classic 80s slasher films, creating tension over who lives and who dies, while also raising the stakes significantly higher than in most other choices matter type games. Until Dawn also benefited from high production values, with impressive facial capture and well-known actors, and its interactive movie format was made much fresher by the many years since it was last attempted. Ultimately, Until Dawn exceeded Sony's expectations, and led to several similar games in the years that followed. Not every game was this successful, however. 2016's Nightcry might be one of horror's greatest failures. Nightcry was kickstarted in early 2015 as a successor to Clock Tower from Clock Tower's creator, Hifumi Kono, and the director of The Grudge, Takashi Shimizu. Other big horror names were also attached to the project, including Silent Hill art director Masahiro Ito. In fact, the Kickstarter page seemed to feature just about every famed Japanese horror developer, with the likes of Resident Evil creator Shinji Mikami and Silent Hill creator Keiichiro Toyama showing up to tell everyone what a great game Nightcry will be. Turns out, they were wrong. Nightcry was faithful to its inspiration, including copying its point-and-click gameplay and Scissorman-like pursuer, yet reviews lambasted it for its poor controls, weak presentation, and excess of bugs. Meanwhile, at the other end of the spectrum, Dead by Daylight also released that year and has since become the highest-selling horror game ever made. Dead by Daylight was not the first asymmetrical multiplayer game, or even the first asymmetrical horror game, as a similar idea was seen in Left 4 Dead. Yet it did popularize the concept, and to great success. Matches involve 4 survivors trying to escape from one killer by completing a number of tasks, while the killer attempts to pick them off one by one, sticking them on meat hooks to be sacrificed to an even greater evil. In this way, Dead by Daylight was a distillation of many horror movies' most exciting moments, where tension over being caught hangs over every action and decision. Its pursuer also solved the problem of AI growing predictable and familiar by casting that role to the least predictable intelligence of all, other people. In time, it would also benefit from a near endless list of DLC introducing other licensed villains, making it a bit like Super Smash Bros. For serial killers. The other major event that year was a trailer from Capcom for a very different looking horror game to what the studio was then known for. In fact, it was so different, people didn't even realize what it was.
Condemned is a great guess. Yeah. No. Nope. Never. Seven silent.
Resident Evil 7 released in January 2017 and brought the horror back to gaming's most famous horror series. When comparing 7 to what came before, it seems obvious that it was influenced by the success of indie games like Amnesia and Outlast, as well as the game that never was, PT. RE7 changed to a more immersive first-person perspective, it emphasized the protagonist's vulnerability with unkillable antagonists, and it freed itself from the series' narrative baggage to tell a more grounded and chilling story. Resident Evil 7 basically learned from the horror games that did work in the 2010s, and yet, unlike many of those games, it also had something they didn't: strong gameplay that could support a full-length game. RE7 returned to the slow exploration, resource management, and puzzle solving of the series' roots to create a genuinely modern take on classic survival horror that could still be enjoyed by modern players thanks to its first-person action combat. As a result, it's hard not to see Resident Evil 7 as a culmination of the entire genre up until this point. It took the gameplay foundation from the original Resident Evil, the mass appeal action combat from later RE games, the tension and narrative intrigue of PT, and the importance of disempowerment and horror that committed to being scary from smash indie hits. And its reward for all this was strong reviews, strong sales, and a renewed belief in the Resident Evil series and in mainstream horror in general. The Evil Within 2 also released that year, and while it may have lacked the dramatic impact of RE7, it still made numerous improvements on the original and helped restore confidence in horror's future. And the following years would only provide more reasons to feel optimistic. In early 2019, Resident Evil continued its winning streak with a remake of Resident Evil 2. Announced back in 2015, the remake would use the same engine as 7, but with a third-person camera that preserved the visual style of the original game, alongside a modern control scheme. Yet, despite this perspective difference, the remake stuck closely to the philosophy that made RE7 such a success. The gameplay was a reimagining of classic survival horror, the combat appealed to modern audiences, and the horror was emphasized rather than neglected, with a strong focus on atmosphere and even some changes to the original game, like an earlier arrival of Mr. X to create deliberate unfamiliarity for series veterans. Resident Evil 2's critical and commercial reception was even more positive than 7's, with it eventually becoming the best-selling game in the series. And so, like the remake of Resident Evil 1 so many years earlier, Resident Evil 2 sets a new gold standard for what a remake should be that all future games would be measured against, including the remake of Resident Evil 3, which released 1 year later and was found somewhat wanting. But as the new decade began, it was hard not to imagine a bright future. Indie games continued to find success through innovation, as can be seen by Phasmophobia, which was created by a single developer and has since passed 22 million in total sales. In Phasmophobia, teams of 4 players investigate paranormal activity in various locations to identify the cause of hauntings. Its most unique feature was its use of speech recognition, where players...
Okay, I only got to apply for one more job, and then we'll see if I'm going to take a break, and then yeah, let me just keep going. I'm almost done. In fact, I might probably wrap up with this as soon as we wrap up with the documentary. So we'll see.
players could communicate with each other based on proximity or walkie-talkies, but where the game would also understand key words players said, with ghosts potentially reacting to this, triggering certain events or attempts to communicate back. This idea was highly novel, and the cooperative nature helped create emergent, unscripted moments of tension, success, and failure. And as with other indie hits before it, Phasmophobia's success was also helped by popularity on Twitch and YouTube. 2020 would also bring the release of Visage, a game directly inspired by PT that was kickstarted after the cancellation of Silent Hills and did an admirable job of capturing the former's sense of psychological despair as you explored another nightmarish house in first person. Then, in 2021, Resident Evil continued strong with Village, the 8th mainline installment, which continued the first-person continuity of 7. How do you make a successful horror sequel? Well, Village's answer was to do the same thing that's worked so many times previously, to one-up what came before. Resident Evil Village was more exaggerated, with more ridiculous villains, more spectacle-heavy boss fights, and a higher intensity to the action. The result was a less scary game, but to be fair, Resident Evil has always been about more than just horror. There is a camp, self-aware desire to have fun with horror that runs throughout this entire series, which makes Village seem like a natural progression. Resident Evil's 8th game simply repeats the same trend seen in 2 and 3 compared to 1, or 5 and 6 compared to 4. And maybe that's okay, because a series that has reinvented itself before can reinvent itself again the next time it needs to go back to its horror roots. Retro survival horror had also become more prevalent by 2021, with games like Tormented Souls or Alyssa both offering the fixed camera angles and optional tank controls that were missing from even Resident Evil's modern titles. The impact of these retro revival games might be small compared to some indie hits, but they've still been able to find a dedicated audience amidst the modern gaming landscape, which has ensured new titles have continued to release since. 2022's Signalis in particular received much acclaim for its strong aesthetics and memorable story about Orwellian dystopia, cosmic horror, and love. Yet, indie horror is also still dominated by viral sensations. 2022 brought a sudden surge of interest in liminal horror, particularly around the Backrooms, a large extra-dimensional expanse of empty rooms popularized by creepypastas and 4chan's X-board. In response, a number of hastily developed games appeared, the best known being Escape the Backrooms, a cooperative exploration-based game that tried to capture the dreary ambience and unsettling vibe of its inspiration. Still, if there's one thing the horror genre hasn't managed in recent years, it's creating new, successful, higher-budget titles. 2022's The Callisto Protocol is a good example. Positioned as a spiritual successor to Dead Space, and directed by the former's creator, Glenn Schofield, The Callisto Protocol set audience expectations high with polished trailers and plenty of Dead Space callbacks. The final game, however, was criticized for its weak story, poor technical performance, and simplistic combat lacking in enemy variety. Unsurprisingly, sales did not meet expectations. Disappointment over the Callisto Protocol was deepened by how long fans had been waiting for a Dead Space successor, and yet, by some strange twist of fate, a remake for the original Dead Space would release just 2 months later. Dead Space 2023 likely owes its existence to the success of Capcom's Resident Evil remakes, and yet it didn't quite represent such a drastic change to its source material, given that Dead Space's 2008 action gameplay still felt relatively modern. As a result, the Dead Space remake was a faithful recreation that made small tweaks to story and gameplay, and was well received by fans and critics. This didn't appear to be enough, however, as while developer Motive explored ideas of both a remake to Dead Space 2 and a new original entry into the series, publisher EA reportedly refused to greenlight further titles due to the remake's disappointing sales. This suggests big-budget horror games are still struggling to achieve consistent mainstream appeal, and yet 2023 continued to be a strong year for the genre. Capcom extended their run of remakes with Resident Evil 4, which became their highest reviewed game since Resident Evil 4. The remake stuck closely to the style of the previous remakes, expanding some of the features of the original game, like by adding stealth kills and the ability to parry, while maintaining a slightly darker and more serious tone. 2023 would also bring a successful follow-up to Amnesia from Frictional Games in The Bunker, which took inspiration from immersive sims to deepen player agency, ratcheting up the stressful decision-making to even greater levels as the player explored a single open bunker during World War I while being hunted by an unkillable monster. Co-op horror would also receive another smash hit in Lethal Company, which willingly embraced the often absurd and humorous nature of horror with friends in a game about exploring procedurally generated moons to collect scrap. Lethal Company is another example of a single solo developer having a huge impact, and again shows the importance of social media on viral success. Meanwhile, indie innovation would continue with the new emergence of anomaly hunting games, a trend which dates back to at least I'm on Observation Duty in 2018, but which started to find more popularity with games like The Exit 8 in late 2023. Anomaly hunting feeds off horror's ability to generate paranoia in players, although it has yet to be successfully expanded into a gameplay system with more depth than a spot the difference puzzle. Alan Wake 2 would also release that year to give mainstream horror another highly acclaimed entry that struggled to back up its strong critical success with similar sales. Alan Wake 2 featured a stronger horror focus than its predecessor, and impressed with its creativity and originality. And yet it would raise further questions about horror's viability for big-budget titles. When poorly received games sell poorly, it's expected. When highly reviewed games do the same, it suggests that there might be a deeper problem. Finally, 2024 would produce much of the same. Alone in the Dark would get another unsuccessful reboot after its long hiatus. Retro horror would continue strong with Crow Country. Indie hits like Mouthwashing and My Side would further show the importance of social media on success. And Silent Hill would join in on the remake trend with Blooper Team's Silent Hill 2, a game which turned out far better than many expected given the challenge of remaking such a beloved classic. Silent Hill 2's remake would again adopt a third-person, over-the-shoulder control scheme while remaining faithful to the original story, and after years of unsuccessful Western Silent Hill games, followed by years of silence or worse, its success has been the best thing to happen to the series in a very long time. And so, horror is officially back. Just as long as it's a remake of a game people already love that uses the exact same gameplay as every other modern hit. Otherwise, success seems less certain, but there are still reasons to be hopeful, and reasons to worry, because the future of horror is genuinely unknown, just like it always has been. If you want to understand the entire history of horror games, you need to understand the importance of familiarity. It took many years for developers to work out how to create gameplay that works with horror rather than against it. Gameplay inherently leads to familiarity, which inherently harms horror. It took the breaking of established rules to overcome this problem, with player vision being restricted, protagonists being disempowered, and consequences for failure being heightened, all to create tension, dread, and vulnerability. Resident Evil 1 then took this to a new level, and was rewarded with staggering success, which enshrined survival horror as its own distinct genre ever since, and led to numerous sequels, successors, and copycats. And it was this success which became its downfall. Ideas that were once new became old, things that were fresh became stale, and the unknown became familiar, as horror lost its edge. And so the genre was forced to change, with Resident Evil 4 leading the way and taking much of the acclaim and much of the blame for this shift towards action. This change solved the problem of familiarity, but the objectives of action often work against those of horror, and so as soon as the novelty of new cameras and combo systems wore off, horror once more faced the same issue, but this time with even shakier horror foundations. At the same time as this, indie games emerged to provide a near-endless source of innovation, originality, and social media content, bringing horror to ever greater audiences and lifting up both the deserving and sometimes undeserving. But as indie horror flourished, mainstream horror languished, until Resident Evil once more tackled the problem of familiarity by reinventing itself to go back to its roots, while learning from what did work in the modern horror landscape. Since then, Resident Evil has continued to find success, but other big-budget horror games have struggled to replicate this, leaving the future of a genre uncertain. Outside of horror, modern gaming is increasingly dominated by recognizable IPs, sequels, and remakes, as ever-growing gaming budgets force the industry to avoid risks by chasing trends and sticking to what's proven to work. Yet for horror, this approach doesn't guarantee the same safety. The more horror stays the same, the less effective it becomes, and the fact that the only big-budget games being regularly made are coming from the exact same series, using the exact same gameplay, and often even being remakes of the exact same games, feels like a warning for the future. But there is still room for developer creativity, and if mainstream horror does seem destined to face the same problem of familiarity all over again, it can also just reinvent itself again, all while indie horror can continue to experiment and pick up any creative slack. The future of horror is uncertain. The genre has now grown so wide that fans of one type of horror game aren't necessarily fans of others. There is a fracturing between gameplay-heavy experiences versus gameplay light, retro design versus modern, multiplayer versus single, humorous versus serious, action versus disempowerment. The genre is far from unified, and there is no obvious answer to what mainstream horror should be. But the diversity the genre now provides seems like one of its greatest assets. Different people may prefer different things, but horror arguably needs these differences. Horror can't survive if it becomes too familiar. This is why making a horror game is so challenging. And this is a challenge that I feel doesn't always get enough appreciation. Society has a tendency to undervalue and look down on horror. It's historically been rare for horror movies or books to receive much critical acclaim, even for some of the very best. And this has sometimes continued into the realm of video games. The Game Awards, for example, has many categories and recognizes many specific genres, but horror isn't one of them despite its suitability. Meanwhile, indie horror risks being written off as being all about cheap jump scares, crude gore, or dumb internet content. And yet, horror is a genre which takes full advantage of the unique qualities of the medium. Horror games provide experiences you can't find anywhere else. And the genre has a long history of innovation, creativity, and risk-taking that I think is worth remembering. Thank you for watching. If you want to support these videos, you can do so on Patreon. Videos like this take a lot of time and involve a lot of research, which is all done by me alone. So I appreciate the assistance and financial security generous viewers provide. Otherwise, I might be streaming a bit on YouTube in a couple days, probably some horror game. So if you want to hear me talk about horror games even more, then you've probably already missed your chance because most views on these videos come after the first couple days. But oh well. Next video, maybe more horror, maybe more RPG. We'll see.
Okay, that was Never Knows Best. The guys does lots and lots of great documentary stuff. Let me link this in the chat so y'all can go check him out. Definitely go give his video a like. I'm already subscribed. If you like the long form content like that, then he's one of the better YouTube channels out there. One of the best YouTube channels out there, actually. So, let's see, what do we got? We already watched The Internet Historian. Oh, I think the trend is running out. When was this video released? Let me see. 20 hours ago. Oh my gosh, they're still making content on this guy. Okay.
Pirate software.
I felt sorry for this guy for a little bit, especially when somebody described him as the internet's hate fleshlight. and then he kept being a douchebag. And then I stopped feeling sorry for him again. Oh man, remind me to never piss off the whole internet, y'all. I'll have armies of people go through several years of content of everything I've ever posted. I think, yeah, man, this is so strange.
Software is what happens when you give someone with a massive ego a microphone and an audience. Not only does he have some of the worst takes the online gaming community has ever seen.
Oh shit, now this is actually really dumb. It's used car salesman garbage. This is shit. It's shit. Not only do I not want to back this, I'm gonna actively tell people not to.
He also seems deathly allergic to taking accountability.
He wants me to sit down, grovel on my knees and be like, I'm so sorry, Mr. Yamato. It was all my fault, the mage.
Even Dr. K, a professional psychiatrist, failed to make him realize his own arrogance.
I think sometimes the things that I talk about in regards to those types of things is misconstrued as arrogance or boasting, when in reality, I'm just trying to give context.
So that is the problem right there. So I want you to listen to this phrase. This gets misconstrued as arrogance, but in reality, it's this.
Yeah.
That is the most arrogant statement on the planet, bro. Like, tell me I'm wrong.
Okay, I don't see it that way, but all right.
And the moment the internet saw his true colors, it was all downhill from there.
Okay, all right. I think the internet anarchist. What does this guy do? He's got tons of views. Let's see videos. Oh, this is the type of stuff he makes. Okay. It doesn't interest me. It doesn't grab me. There's something we could watch something else that's more entertaining. I think we could check. Oh, I know. Red Letter Media. These guys are awesome. I'm already subscribed. I should already be subscribed. There we go. Mr. Plinkett's What Happened to Star Wars. Okay, here we go. Yeah, see, I'm subscribed. Let me give this video a like, because I know it's going to be good already. Now, hold on. Let me make some. Okay, I got one thing done. I'm trying to plan out the rest of my day really quick, and I'm afraid that I'm gonna need to take a break before I there's just a lot to do. Okay, I'm just here. I guess I'll show you guys what I'm looking at. There we go. So I took most of yesterday off. Say F it all and play WoW. That's my outlook on life. Yeah. Yeah, I want to. I want to finish the hotkey tutorial. It's like, now that my food is settled and I've got a couple, like I got a couple of things done, and I'm just wore out all of a sudden. Like, just I want to like go lay down for like 90 minutes. And I've had my coffee. I've got to get up in 20 minutes and go put the bread on. I've been I don't know what the hell my problem is. I only streamed for 2 hours yesterday, and then I realized that I needed to go to bed. So like I just went to bed, and then I got up at about 11 today, and I got some things done, and now I want to go lay back down. Get your wings. Hey, Phoebus. No, I think I'll push through it. There's a term for what I am describing. What is it? Laziness? I just got done applying to 5 jobs. It's called depression. Yeah, probably. All right. Okay, I promised my roommate that I would help him out with some stuff. So, that's what I'm going to do for at least the next 30 minutes to an hour. Okay. And I think I'll apply for YouTube Partner tomorrow. I'm just wore out already. And then we need to finish the hotkey tutorial. And then we need to exercise in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hours. Okay. Or I could go lay down for an hour. I don't think laying down for an hour is going to do me any good. So I'm not going to do it. Okay. And then I need to message Above and Beyond because it looks like I definitely want to apply to some jobs at his company. Well, that depends. Depends on what views. If I lay down for an hour and then feel recharged. I want to get these videos done. That's what I really want to do. But I have other responsibilities. Can I just lay down for an hour on the stream? Okay. Well, we're out of coffee, but I have tea. Set an alarm. Okay. Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, let me take a break. I will set an alarm. My alarm goes off and the bread is going to be done, or the dough is going to be finished rising in 17 minutes. I guess it could rise an extra 15 minutes. That's no big deal. There we go. Okay. Okay. Well, let me go do that. And I guess I'll just stop the live stream and then we'll pick it back up again. The live stream could suddenly go out. I don't know if you folks can hear the thunder and the lightning, but it's pretty fucking loud. Probably not because I got a noise gate on the microphone. Put my feet up. Okay. Okay, let me go do that. Because the idea here, let's move this down here. And let's move this down here. Okay, and we're going to make this green because it's a health thing. And then we're going to say, quick break before starting the stream again. Okay. All right. Well, at least I got done applying to some jobs, and I caught up on my Discord messages, and I cleaned the kitchen, and I made food. And ooh, let's do that. Let's put actually no, we can do it on Monday. Monday is going to be super interesting. Monday I have to go to the post office to pick up a package for my roommate. And I don't speak Spanish. And I don't have any cell service, so I'm gonna have the Uber. I'll call an Uber from here. The Uber will drop me off at the post office. Then I'll go into the post office. It'll take me however long it takes to get the package, and then I'm gonna walk back. It's only like a 3-mile walk. So that's like what, 2 hours? I need the exercise and I need the sun. What was I gonna put here? Come on. Damn, see, now I was gonna put something here specifically. Now I can't remember what it was. Okay, clearly I need to go lay down. I wish I knew. I'm just fucking tired and out of it. Right, let me go lay down for an hour or 30 minutes, and let me drink my caffeine. I'll be back in 30 minutes to an hour, y'all.